A few lines later, Karen is delighted. This ecstatic couple loves each other proclaim the cruel egoism and injustice of happy people. This sentence is incredibly powerful. Camus says that even joy can be unjust. Their happiness depends on forgetting the suffering that others went through and the people who didn't survive. In other words, their freedom is built on violence. What Camus is doing here is almost psychological. He shows that forgetting is not passive, it's active. It's a defense mechanism. To forget, not because they are cruel, but because memory holds too much. They erase the truth in order to return to what they call normal life. But that forgetting, according to Camus, comes with a cost. It means that all the moral questions raised by the plague about compassion, courage, and justice are left unanswered. The city reveals, yes, but it also resets. The balance between good and evil, which was so visible during the plague, fades away again into the habit and comfort. Camus isn't condemning people for wanting to live. He's pointing out something deeply human. To survive, we often have to forget. Yet, this very act of forgetting is what allows the absurd to continue. So, in this first insight, I'd like to summarize two key points. First, the citizens of Oran remember in a shallow way. And second, forgetting becomes the condition for returning to normal life. In short, the people's joy is real, but it's also fragile and self-centered. It's a joy that depends on not knowing too much. Now, in contrast to this collective forgetting, Camus gives us Dr. Liu, a man who refuses to look away. When everyone else celebrates, Liu does not join them. He stays distant, observing the crowd piling. He feels the same relief, but he cannot share their joy. Too many people have died. His wife, also his friend Taru, and countless others. Camus writes, Dr. Liu resolved to compile this chronicle so that he should not be one of those who hold their peace, but should bear witness in favor of the plague-stricken people. This moment defines Liu's entire character. He decides to write, not to be heroic, but to be honest. He wants to make sure that the suffering is remembered, not erased under the noise of celebration. Later in the same passage, Camus asked, the tale he had to tell could not be one of a final victory. It could be only the record of what had to be done and what assuredly could have to be done again. This line captures the heart of Camus' philosophy. For Liu, there is no final victory against the plague. All that exists is the human effort to keep resisting again and again. And the first step in that resistance is to remember honestly. Liu's writing, therefore, becomes a moral act, an act of quiet rebellion. He knows that memory won't change the past, but it can preserve human dignity. To remember truthfully is to remain awake, to refuse comfort brought through ignorance. Liu also embodies what Camus calls decency. He's not a saint, and he never claims to be. He simply does his job. He helps the sick, he records facts, he stays truthful. But in a world that consistently forgets, the kind of simple honesty becomes an act of courage. So the second insight can be summed up in 2 points. First, Liu's chronicle is an ethical act. It transforms memory into a form of resistance. By writing, he ensures that the pain and loss won't disappear into history's silence. Second, Camus defines human goodness not as heroism, but as persistence. Real morality lies not in grand gestures, but in the quiet decision to keep working, to keep caring, even when no one notices. Forgetting makes life easier, remembering makes life heavier. But for Camus, it's that way, that willingness to carry the truth, that defines what it means to be human. So here's the interpretive argument. When we bring these two insights together, we see that part 5 isn't about freedom at all. It's about what people do with freedom, whether they use it to forget or to remember. Camus draws a moral contrast. The city's collective joy is noisy but hollow, while Liu's solitude is quiet but meaningful. The crowd's forgetting allows life to go on, but Liu's remembering gives the life depth and conscience. In the end, Camus isn't saying that forgetting is evil and remembering is good. He's saying that forgetting is inevitable, but how we respond to it defines our humanity. Do we let it turn us complicit, or do we keep some part of ourselves awake and responsible? That's why, in the final paragraph, Camus writes us, the plague Bacillus never dies or disappears for good. It can lie dormant for years and send them forced to die in a happy city. The happy city could be any city, ours indeed. Whenever we stop remembering, the plague returns. The plague is not just disease, it's indifference. So the novel doesn't end with celebration but with caution. Camus leaves us with this quiet truth. Survival without memory is only half life. Real freedom requires not just joy, but responsibility. This courage to remember. So here's the 2 key points to remember. First one is the sentimental remembrance. So why does Cotard, who once enjoyed life under the plague, finally break down and start shooting into the crowd when the epidemic ends? And the second one is, did Taro finally achieve the peace he longed for? And if so, what does it mean if he only found it in depths? So that's all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so you said this. You refer to this detail with very little ceremony. So I want to know, when did you find out that it's Ryu who's speaking?
When?
Yeah.
Almost the final part of the final chapter.
Yeah.
But,
How?
that he mentioned that he couldn't feel the joy of the liberation. He was just inside. He writes. So I could feel it because it was just after the death of Taro.
Okay. Would people like to comment or ask questions? Yeah.
I have a question, if I understood correctly. You kind of described that the act of writing those kernel is humane act of protecting our human dignity. So I was wondering if you think that writing those kernel is sort of superior act of preserving that value compared to those the rituals like the funerals and sobbing in the house. How do you think about that?
Other than ritual things.
Yeah, the normal things that people do in their house.
I think in the novel, the writing thing is really incredible thing, I think, because in this novel, there's some appearances of writing, like the novel written by journalists, and also the Knot of Taro, and also including this book, exactly written by Dr. Liu. So in real life, I don't think that the writing is the most essential thing that human must do, but I think Camus really used this writing thing as a manner of conveying his opinion.
Okay.
Can I answer the question?
Yeah.
The first question about Clotteric, I do believe that during the fog, Clotteric was more calm because all the people were living in fear that he used to live in. He finally found joy in group suffering because everyone was living under the fear of the plague, and he was living under that fear before the plague even started. So now everyone were living in this collective fear, and he felt like he finally could be the part of the society, that he was not the only one living in fear. And when the plague was over, he felt again that fear, and he broke down and started shooting. And because people were free of this fear, but he wasn't. So I do believe that he kind of snapped at the end because of this.
Very good, yeah, thank you.
So adding on, I thought that the Gota was trying to make so-called another play, and then trying to scare the people, and then tell the people, that this kind of another plague can come again to the society. And I think if we go a bit farther, I think that Gamui is also trying to maybe tell to the reader that though it was just an example of Kota in this case, there will be other cases, like he mentioned in the other parts, that any kind of other crisis, like not just a plague, but other crisis can appear to the society. And I think maybe that is the reason why Gamui has put Kota at the very end, this kind of situation at the very end, to get more extensive.
How, I'm not sure how, because maybe I missed it. Where do you see that he is kind of warning people against another plague?
I'm not exactly warning, Professor. What I thought was that I think it was the author's warning toward the reader to use this idea of the plague, the Kota's shooting, in order to tell them that as he had mentioned in other parts, that the plague is not just ended, and it's something like pyramid society. That was what I was trying to say.
He was going to the doctor and asked him if there is possibility that the plague will come back. And then when the doctor told him, I can't possibly tell you what's going to happen in the future, he was going back to the people and telling everyone that it's not over, you shouldn't be so happy about it, it's not over. So he was just making sure that people still live in that fear. And
Yeah, well, there he was kind of clinging to the possibility that this may go on, as you're explaining, because that would suit him better.
yes.
But he ends up, committing this other. He's about to, add to his criminal record now. I mean, he does. So that action is what we're trying to figure out here. Yes.
I kind of agree with this argument because in the final chapter, when the plague loses its power, the novel describes that there are certain incidents where it just abruptly kills people in certain regions, and I thought that maybe Kota is killing, shooting, maybe kind of resonates with this plague's effort to not being forgotten and used its power. Kota, he was a member of this plague society inside the plague, but he's eventually becoming kind of marginalized, and it's only himself that is still embracing the fear of uncertainty. So I thought in that sense maybe Kotar could be a humane allegory for the plague in that sense.
Okay. I guess his wish for the plague. What I'm trying to say is that the fact that he wishes for the plague to continue is, yes, obviously we see that, but that's one thing. But to describe his action, shooting at people and things like that, as another plague is a completely different argument. You can't quite put the plague and someone acting in this erratic manner on the same level. Yes, they are both unpredictable, but the unpredictability of the plague is so much more vast than one individual, shooting randomly. So I'm just saying, yes, they're both uncertain, but the uncertainty that we've been describing in relation to the absurd is something that is much more universal. It's not just simply someone's erratic behavior. So that the difference in levels we shouldn't lose sight of. That he wishes for the plague doesn't make him a kind of plague. No. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Yeah.
Then in that case, then how can we say, even though it's an individual act, that people like Ryu, just by writing a book, that he's actively combating the plague? Like if we say that this is he's like by committing like that kind of individual act,
Right.
he's not actively, let's say, propagating another plague,
Right.
then someone like Ryu, by individually writing about the plague, that could we say that that's not necessarily combating the plague either?
But why is it? What is it that he's writing? Is it about his personal life? It's not. It's not about his experience of the plague, which many people did during the pandemic. But his interest in keeping this record is to serve humanity. He doesn't even think that this is going to be somehow circulated, and he's gonna no. He doesn't have an Instagram account. I don't know. Can people write on Instagram? Anyway, so some kind of platform that you would write about your experience. No, he's actually, without even really knowing whether anyone's going to read it, he thinks it is his responsibility as a human being to try to leave a record. So in other words, can you imagine how many brilliant people in our history, in the history of humanity, must have written great things that never got read? But can we say that because they were not read, they're useless? They didn't do anything? I mean, that's kind of a kind of question that I think, Jean, you're getting at. Why is writing down something more important than performing rituals that people take for granted? Why is just writing important? But that's something that I think people can think about on their own. But the point is, that's why, in a way, Cotard is, when he wishes for the plague, the motivation is very individual, because he doesn't want to be left alone. He doesn't want to be the only one who's afraid. But with Ryu, he has nothing to gain out of this, but he feels this is somebody has to keep a record of this enormous event. That's why he's doing it. So in that sense, I think the individual versus universal, they are kind of they mark two very different positions on that relationship between particular and universal, or individual and collective. Okay, I wonder what did you think, Erin? How does Cotard fit in your reading? You gave us two insights. How would you situate Cotard in this reading that you shared with us?
Cotard?
Yeah.
Like inside one, the majority of people just decides to forget the flag, but in the contrary, Cotard decides to just erases everything. So I think their act is very similar, but it's because it's just the opposite behavior of resistance and the struggle. So I think they're similar, unlike Dr. Liu.
Okay. Would anyone care to, yeah?
I mean, I feel like my perspective about it is maybe a lot unreal, but what I have to say is like, I feel like the act of him like firing indiscriminately, it shows like on an individual level, like a micro level of like representation of the whole idea of like a play being so indiscriminate. Whereas like if you take the action of just him firing, it could hit something, it could not hit something, it could cause damage. Like I couldn't, when I was reading it, like I just connected it to like where he said that the microbe can still exist and come back at any time, just like any other evil in like humanity. And so it's like the seed of attack is just random, and we can rationalize it and put blame toward it, even if we don't understand it. And I'm not sure if this is making any sense, but that's like kind of how I connect it is like if you take him as a metaphor for the wider like distortion that something major in human like events can cause like the violence.
Yeah, but it's just, I guess a good way of understanding the function of Kuta's character is how the narrator or the narrative, how the text uses it. So if that sounds too abstract, think about how Tahu or Liu, how they think of him. He's obviously a kind of rogue member of the community. He's not up to any good, but what is their attitude towards him? Are they critical?
I mean, Taro mentions before the review goes to Clara, the grants area, Taro mentions that before he's dead, he said that Clara, I understand him and I shouldn't judge him because we're all people and it's human that he acts this way.
Yes. So in other words, Tahu, he doesn't say he accepts Kuta's attitude. He wants it to continue. He of course doesn't think it's a good. That's something that he has to forgive. He uses the word pardon. He has to forgive him that attitude, but he doesn't criticize him because both Ryu and Tahu positions Kota as one of them dealing with the plague. He's a feeble individual who's fearful of the plague in the sense of all that is contingent. He is just as much a victim as all the rest of them. This is why I am kind of. It would be partial to put him on the side of the plague because the text clearly wants to kind of embrace him as one of us. He's a member of the community and he's just as fearful as anyone else. Even when he's doing the wrong things, the motivation is not anything very, motivation itself is not anything criminal. It's not that he wants to do something. So much of it comes out of fear. And what do we in the end fear? Of course, we fear this or that thing or person, but in the end, we fear of the fact that nothing is determined. And we have to deal with this uncertainty on a daily basis. And he's just like us. It's just that he doesn't know how to handle it, perhaps as efficiently as some others, but he is on the side of the community rather than on the side of the plague. This is what I'm trying to emphasize, yes.
So like based on what you just said, maybe like what Kotar has said, maybe it seems kind of similar to the play, like initially, it seems quite similar, but maybe the Camille was trying to like discriminate, distinguish the two, stuff that human can do and stuff that human cannot do. The plague itself is what, it's out of our hands. That's nothing that we can do here, but maybe the text is trying to like contrast the two things. So like if like people might say that it looks similar, but he's trying to say that it's a different thing. It's just
Yeah, I mean, yes, but that's at one level that is valid. But at another level, I'm sure people have read about it on the internet, that the plague is given as a metaphor for the war, the World War II. And there are many images in the book that look like some documentary footage of, you know, the whole Holocaust. The trains transporting bodies, you know, mass burial, and all that. The images that he uses to describe the aftermath of the plague are very much what we are familiar with by watching, you know, documentary or reading history books about the war. So then the war is, of course, it's not like, it's not caused by microbe. It's not a natural disaster like the plague, but it can also be experienced as a kind of like a natural disaster because you didn't participate in the cause of it, and then it's suddenly there, and you have to deal with the consequences. So, so what I'm trying to say is that your reading leaves room for thinking about human-made disasters that can still be experienced as, you know, enormous events just like the plague. So that something is there as a possibility. So I guess everybody thought Kota is very interesting. I'm surprised. Okay. So the last question about Tahu. Peace, and he died. Any comments on this?
I think it's a really difficult question to answer because maybe his body they described his body as peaceful, but I feel like he didn't finish what he really wanted to do, and or like how he really wanted to achieve peace. Because for him, I guess peace is not only his personal peace, but more like a general like reward peace, you know. And I feel like after the end of the plague, or when it stabilizes, he deserves to also see more of what's left, and maybe he could have done more too. So it's kind of difficult to answer because maybe for the text he has a great piece because it's for me it's kind of injustice.
Yes, it makes you sad. Yes, I know. It makes you sad. And in a way, if you want to talk about the plague as a metaphor for the contingent and all the absurd at the level of the individual, you can think of Tahu's death as that. Why? Because Pyu is really, he's completely, he wasn't ready for it. You know, it's all over, and then here's the soldier of this whole movement, and he dies. I mean, this is so that's where you can see the absurd hitting the individual at really a very intimate level, right? His best friend, and he just dies.
I mean, and then I feel like, honestly though, I guess I read this question and I was like, didn't think about it because the thing I noticed most when I was reading it was actually his wife died. I don't know why, I don't know why that was so significant, and I was wondering like if you could connect like the significance of like his wife, like, I don't even know, I don't remember, she died in the sanatorium, but she had tuberculosis, like she probably died of tuberculosis.
Right.
So I was wondering if like you have comment that like she still died over the period where the plague's ending, but like she didn't die of the plague. She just had like pre-existing conditions. So I wonder if you have comment.
Maybe she had had her own play, not even if that was not this specific play. Yeah, so it's just a natural disaster. So therefore, Leo just embraces all the deaths, like from Taro and his wife.
Okay, I mean, it's a bit, yeah, I'll come back to you.
I thought, I mean, both deaths happen in the same chapter. And I thought that that the author, Camus, was trying to contrast one death, which was predictable. I think it said that he was waiting for the telegram or something in that chapter, and one death that was not at all predictable and came as more of a shock to Ryu and impacted him much more in that chapter. And I think through that contrast, we see that Ryu in this book is not just a practical figure or a narrator or somebody that has to deal with the plague as a doctor, but also somebody that is very ideological to an extent and tries to share some kind of meaning with, or let's say, he and Teru both tries to find life's meaning through dealing with the plague. And I thought that chapter really showed how close Ryu and Teru were on that kind of ideological level as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just, I'm a little bit confused by what you mean by ideology or ideological.
Well, I mean, Teru, when he starts talking about, there is like the guy that used to, I don't know, do something with the cats.
Yes,
Like
yes,
he
yes.
disappears and
Right.
then he goes on about life's meaning and all of that. And clearly from, let's say, a practical perspective, losing your wife would be much more devastating than losing a friend. But
Not
the
necessarily, but
I
for sure,
mean,
yeah.
in most cases, but at least in this chapter, we see that there is they share more on a ideological level, like when it comes to the meaning of life, or how they approach religion, or how they approach
Okay.
the plague, or like an absurd situation that showed that he shares more with people on that kind of level, more so than just a relation.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I don't know if the text actually is aware of this little detail, because the point of our interpretation, or I prefer the word analysis, is to basically it has two levels. One level is to articulate the logic of the text. You explain what the text is doing. This is number one task of any literary analysis. It's not about figuring out what this means, what that means, this kind of the level of little elements, and then you try to interpret them. That's just that's more like a preparation for actual analysis. Analysis is complete when you can explain what the text is doing. So that's one. But if you want to go further, be even more open to challenges, you can think about what the text seems to do without quite being aware of it itself. I mean, this is already beyond the scope of our course, but I can give an example of the second point. It's almost like that because it's Ryu's own account, in a way, him not talking about the loss of his wife is his. It's a form of modesty. He doesn't want to talk about his private life. We can think of it that way, but it's what I'm trying to say. I add this only because it goes with what I was saying earlier about how Tahu's death can be read as the absurd at the level of the individual in the aftermath of this temporary, at least, resolution of the plague, this much more universal disaster. But anyways, okay, so thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah. you cold? Are people cold?
Can I
Okay.
ask maybe? Excuse me, Professor.
Yes.
Is there any way I could still answer the quiz question?
What?
I came in late. Is it still possible if I can answer the quiz question?
Quiz? No, sorry.
Okay.
Alright, so my name is Jean Yu, and I'll be presenting my interpretation about the part 5 of the play. So I have to, before giving the presentation, have to confess that I didn't even realize, I didn't even try to guess who the author, the writer is. So I just realized that the Yu is actually writing the Carlyle because he told me so. And those explanations are purely based on my untouched biases. So in part 3 and 4, the people were kind of collected under the same condition of the plague. But what I realized during part 5 is that there was some tendencies that people diverges into 3 categories. So the first categories were like people who got freedom and they would be so happy that they got freedom and they would go to the places they have been long yearning for. And the second group of people were mourning for their deceased loved ones and couldn't relish the free time that even though they were eager for. But the Cotard, like the third group of people, I guess he's the only one, but they were kind of wishing the plague would hit again in town so that they could relish their power, and they were missing those disastrous power. So so my thesis is that we live with constant dissonance with our language. So we're gonna talk about the dissonance about the language later on. And the Oham's transition to original normacy does not resolve uncertainty. So basically, I explained those sort of conditions. So this is related to the uncertainty, and it merely changes its form. So what we define about the normacy is highly subjective to the conditions we're in, and only an ending contingency only is repeated and remains definite. So yeah. We're bound with this vicious cycle, and the plague represents our life itself. We suffer, we die, we commemorate, and we forget. So that's my thesis, but it looks a little bit vague, so I would like to explain it with 2 ideas. So the main idea 1 is normacy as a situational concept. So I mentioned that the normalcy is highly subjective to the situations we're in, and the first case is the official declaration of the termination of the plague. So the government kind of announced that the plague is over, but people could not just relish it. So it is highly, easily understandable in terms of emotional perspective, because obviously you cannot celebrate your birthday when your family member is gone, like they're died. They cannot just enjoy. So I found this, the first quotation, a limbo between joy and grief. So people were feeling those 2 contradicting emotions. And yeah. So the linguistic articulation of what I'm trying to say is about the state of uncertainty. So the joy and grief is about the emotional part, and what we have to delve into is what we call about the normacy and the abstract nature of the language. So the state of uncertainty is about whether if the plague is going to be again, and yeah. So look at the normalcy part. People call something normal once they have adjusted to it. I don't think that people were just curious about the medical terms of the plague being recoming back. They were so adapted to the second normalcy of their life, which is the plague status. So they couldn't accept the concept of new normalcy, even though it was original one. So that's the part what I'm trying to say about the linguistic definition of normacy. So So look at the quotation, like, but what do you mean by a return to a normal life? Just like the people like Cotard couldn't have just accept the idea of new normalcy. At least one person in town viewed this retreat with consternation if taboo notes are to be trusted, and that man was Cotard. So what defines normalcy is highly subjective to human experience, and it was Cotard who exhibited this pattern. And yeah, apart from emotional explanations, we have to focus on the how people define the normalcy and the way they adapt to new normalcy from one another. And the third part, what I try to look at is human efforts and its instability. So no matter how they try, they couldn't just get rid of those contingency. So like I've cut all the adjectives. So Guang kind of tried to articulate his sentences with clarity, but he constantly fails. And in the last part, he just deleted all the adjectives so that he could make his phrases more clear. And I thought this kind of resembles the way people try their best. Like you try to cure, not to revive the patients, but do their jobs. Like Tahu and Lihu, and those acts of services could link to this articulational efforts, I want to say. And yeah, I put this one as a question for you. If you like the adjective-free sentences or not. Because obviously sentences without adjectives doesn't sound so fancy. So like it's kind of vain effort to make those sort of perfect sentences. So we kind of talked about the Father Penelou last week, and I mentioned like Father Penelou had complete faith in God, so he kind of tried to cast some questions to him, and then the complete faith he tried to have was never achieved because the complete faith doesn't exist technically. So the human efforts for the free condition of those sort of contingency, like will be this plague over or not, is not achievable. We couldn't just answer. And then the fourth part is remembrance and commemoration as an act of adaptation. So before people just adapt to the new stage of the phase, they do some sort of ritual stuff like funerals, if it's a happy case, like weddings. So, and I also have a personal questions for you. Does anybody have siblings or like brothers? Most of you guys. Do you have siblings? Oh, like I was so wondering, like if you go to your sister's wedding and some narrator says like, there is the most beautiful and the most kindest person in this world and she's getting married, like what's your reaction? Is your sister the most kindest person who never yells at you?
Yeah, it would be a little surprising.
So yeah, there's a point that I like to focus on because like you're not so obsessed with your sister before she got married, but you realize some void because she's gonna get married to a guy and she'll not be visiting you that often. Then suddenly you kind of change the dynamics into the lovely sisters so that you could feel better about those boys. So same thing I guess happens here. So people try to remember to forget. So they went to the pilgrims to the places like I miss my high school years, but I really study like a dog. I shouldn't miss it, but I miss. But the people here do the same thing. So they miss the school that they suffered, and they try to remember do the funerals for the ones that this is, and they kind of call it love. And when we go to the next page, So there's an idea of self-centered satisfaction from those ritual actions so that they could move on to the next phase of normalcy. So that's how people define the normalcy. And because of this kind of mechanism, they have hard time of accepting the new normalcy. It's not just purely because they were purely missing their loved ones. So that was my explanation. And Hugh, who seemed like the one who has a cold heart, and I think he was sort of happy about his personality, like how stolid he is, like, oh, I'm not expressing my emotions, and I'm practical, I do my job the best. And but at the same time, he was caring so much about the telegrams. So here's the part we have to delve into. So even though he didn't explain, the crude emotions about how much he loves her, but rather like he was dreaming about the fresh start that could be possible later on, and he was expecting for the answer, like, is she alive or got better, or is she dead, so that he could find some answer. But he couldn't know before he had the telegram. So he was kind of suffering at the same time, relishing the contingency about his wife. So yeah, that's where I found Hugh is actually caring a lot about his wife. And Hugh's writing, I didn't think about it as a significant event, but from the conversation we had about the Yari's presentation, I thought Hugh's writing, the chronile, can be interpreted as sort of rituals, just like the people did. But it's his self-being is extended to the human race so much so that he's writing the chronile as the coping mechanism for himself, because for himself is the entire humanity. So it's kind of difficult, but I think you could get it. So, alright, so we kind of look at the celebration, commemoration, and remembrance as a coping mechanism. And the second idea is about the contingency and hope as a coping mechanism against the uncertainty. So obviously the death of Tahu kind of made you to be surprised, and it was kind of worthy to know that Tahu tried his best to keep the smile even when he was literally dying. So yeah, and he begged for Hugh to give only the truth, not a hope. Like, it's not that a significant case. You could get better. You don't have to be isolated. But Tahu constantly insists that he only needs the truth. But the truth cannot, solve every problem in this world. Like, the truth that we have doesn't have any practical power. It doesn't have the dynamic. It doesn't have the power to, get rid of the plague situation. But Tahu was craving for the truth. Because I think it's because he didn't want to suffer from the contingency. As for, the Hugh suffered from the, bad consequences of the death of his wife. So he kind of rejected the idea of hope, and I was able to connect this idea to the Father Penelo's case because he tested the gap, and Tahu kind of resisted the idea of clarity, and they all face that. But it is kind of a logic jump if you just conclude that, they got killed because they challenged something very obvious, because Kong obviously didn't die. So let's keep that let's preserve it to this level. And Hugh's emotional setback, I wrote this as setback, but he didn't try to exhibit his emotional setback, so yeah. The part he was dreaming about the rosy pictures about his future, and he used the exact word abstractions. So he was having the hopes and the struggles at the same time under these situations of abstractions. So, yeah. Alright, so the last part I would like to talk about is plague never disappears part. So this kind of provides us the room to think about what it means by disappears. But I think the quotation part, the plague had not yet ended. I think the yet should be included this line because it just never ends. Look at my explanation. Doing their best job is not to overcome contingency, but to inhabit its consciously. Acting, caring, commemoration, and continuing within what will always remain unfinished. So the plague is not something especially evil, especially disastrous. It is more like our daily life. And even if I also searched it on the internet and it was kind of metaphor for World War I, but it could be linked to any other negative situations in our life. So the plague can be interpreted as whatever you connect with the the negativity. So we always live with those sort of contingency and the kind of offshore nature of those languages. Like the normalcy you define is not normal unless you just personally claim it as normal state. And the common sense, like you have the diverse culture, and some common sense in one culture could be interpreted as something very weird. So, yeah. So it's highly subjective, and we always live with the contingency, and those are entire offshore nature of this word. So it cannot be answered definitely, indefinitely. Yeah, and I also wanted to incorporate the question about Kota because he looks a little bit like the plague, but at the same time he looked just like a man. And I was kind of mesmerized by the fact that you guys asked so many questions about Kota. He obviously did some criminal jobs like smuggling during the plague situations. But at the same time, I think his case is just a metaphor for contingency. Like he got in prison, but we would never know if he's gonna be a free man later on and probably shooting at random people and probably kill some people. We would never know. So this also links to our inability to govern all the situation. So I think that's the all for my explanations. And my discussion questions is first, do you like Brown's invention, which is sentence without adjectives? Why or why not? So think about the sentences you like to make without adjectives, and please tell me if they look fancy or not. And do you like it or why not? And second question is, Convent seems to have undergone character development. So there's a part when he reunites with his lover, but he hesitates to rush and help her because in his mind, all these incidents have the man's heart, according to Convent. But he anyhow just proceeded to her, and he enjoyed the reunite. So yeah, what would have been changed in Convent's heart, and what is unchanged? Those are my questions. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, comments, questions, answers, yes?
Okay, so I'm going to answer the first question. So I think Grant's invention here is really significant because he said at the same time that he started writing back to Jenny for the first time after a
his
long
wife,
time.
yeah.
And then he mentioned that also he will omit all the adjectives. I think that this really resonates well with Ryu's and his mother's action because they said that they don't exchange words a lot. But he have a complete and perfect understanding of the relationship, and he knows that his mother cares deeply for him. So that's why I think that both Gon's and Ryu's actions and his mother's actions want to through these actions, the other one to emphasize, the practicality, the simplicity in the day-to-day actions compared to like words and languages used.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. I really like that you were able to see the connection between the fact that he cut out all the adjectives, and if you remember the first sentence, there's only first sentence we have, because he's writing a book, but all we get is that first sentence, so we keep getting the same sentence, and there's that very tragic scene right before he thinks he's about to die, what does he do?
He tells to burn everything.
Yes, he wants to burn the entire manuscript, but when Ryu looks into it, what is it?
50 pages of the same sentence.
Yes, it's 50 pages of the same sentence. And you just feel your heart kind of contract in that moment. Like, it's, this is a man facing the absurd. It's really, it can be a framed picture of a man against the absurd. That scene where you see them. And anyways, so if you look at the sentence, there are lots of adjectives. He keeps changing things, one word, another word, because he wants to get that adjective right. And then he decides to cut out all the adjectives, and in that same moment, he's able to write his wife for the first time. So what does that mean? I love that you juxtapose them, but I want to know, what does that say? What does it say about his relationship with language? What has changed?
I guess his idea of like confronting fear, because his wife, like he mentioned earlier, I don't know exactly remember, but he mentioned like he kind of doesn't feel good enough, and he feels like he didn't provide her anything, and he views himself as being insufficient without directly saying that. Like he has a complex with perfection, and so that's like demonstrated in him rewriting the same sentence like in an insane amount of times. And so when he is able to say, oh, I can let go, because the sentence he wrote was like all adjectives pretty much, and it was like so much excessive detail that it was like an unreadable sentence. And I guess in his psychology, that's how he felt he needed to be to his wife instead of just being present, like just being there. And so when he was able to break the wall down of having this entirely eloquent sentence, which is up to like interpretation, he also was able to break this barrier to be a perfect man and just do the action that will have the most significance to her.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, so the point is, he thought, this is how, you said it's unreadable, but I thought it was very familiar, his sentence. This is how people write usually. They think anything that sounds fancy is good. So how do they make it fancy? By adding adjectives. And he thought that was what language was supposed to be, and he felt that he was completely inadequate because he didn't know how to do it. But the fact that he doesn't know how to do it makes him so special instead of being very, because many people know how to do that very well. And he doesn't know how to do that, that's why he's suffering. And then he comes to this realization that we don't know what actually went through his mind. We just know the result, which is that he decides to get rid of all the adjectives, which means his relation with language becomes at least shifted. It's not the same kind of relationship that he had before. So from this new relationship, he can write his wife. It's the most poetic part of the whole book, I think, is how he arrives at that point where he makes that decision. Okay. So that's that. Any other comments or yeah?
I have a question about normalcy point that you made. The very last part of that paragraph, you said that there's a new adaptation device people. But based on what the other points have made and based on what I think this whole situation kind of brainwashes people, this control situation kind of brainwashes people to think in a very united way. Like for example, Humbert, he also, at first he thought that the situation is kind of, he kind of disagreed with Ryu, but he sort of like thinks like Ryu and everybody thinks in that sort of way. So that's why I think he kind of hesitated when he first met his wife. So I agree with what you said that normalcy is very objective, but I want like more specific details on why you think that it divides people, not unites.
So like the plague situation was kind of especially bad that united people all together, and the situation they faced again is more like a freedom. So I can't partially agree with your mentioning that they got brainwashed, because like in this sort of situation they cannot exert their talent. Like you cannot just play violin in the concert hall. So once they got freedom, they get to choose how they're gonna react in a certain way. And like people like Kota kind of try to regain his power, and this sort of incidents illustrates those sort of unification during the plague situation wasn't like the complete one, like the complete face that the Father Panu seems to have for the god, just like this one, just like those complete concept of face. The unification the people once formed was sort of forced by the situation, the cruelty of the plague, and once they kind of regain the freedom to act upon their faith, then they show those sort of dissonances. So I think these ideas are not conflicting.
Okay.
I wanted to answer the second question about Humbert, and I have this sentence from the book which says, Humbert was living in fear and trembling to confront this love or affection that the months of the plague had reduced to an abstraction. So I do believe that this plot can be, in here we can provide an analogy with the war. When people come back from war, they change and they cannot feel the same way they used to do before the war. So the same happens to Humbert because the plague changed them a lot. And when you get used to the feeling of waiting and just suppressing your feelings for such a long time, because if you feel everything, you'll be too overwhelmed with emotions. So you kind of suppress these feelings to get over the plague. And when you wait for such a long time, you forget how it actually feels to feel. And when he reconnects with his lover, he doesn't know how to act. And here is, for the time being, he wanted to do what all those around him were doing, apparently believing that the plague can come and go without the hearts of men being changed. I think that this sentence describes a lot, and that he just wants to believe that he's the same and he loves the same as he used to before the plague, but he can't, because the plague, the same as the war, cannot just go unchanged.
Right. Yeah. So I think a good passage to that effect is on. If you have the same edition as mine, it's 294. The bottom of the page says, "If only he could put the clock back and be once more the man who, at the outbreak of the epidemic, had only one thought and one desire, to escape and return to the woman he loved. But that, he knew, was out of the question now. He had changed too greatly. The plague had forced on him a detachment, which, try as he might, he couldn't think away, and which, like a formless fear, which like a formless fear haunted his mind. Almost he thought the plague had ended too abruptly, and he hadn't had the time to pull himself together. So he was waiting for it to end so desperately, and then it suddenly happened, and it feels like he wasn't ready for it, which is yeah. So yeah, as I said one time, he's the youngest member of this the group of people, and as such, he in a way he changes the most because he has more to change. Right. Okay. Yes.
I was just thinking that it really changed because I think at first I thought that he didn't belong to Oran, but I think that by spending time with everyone, he started to feel like he belongs to the city. And just meeting back the woman makes him feel like he has to leave now the city, where he actually feels like he belongs. So maybe
Yes.
he belongs more to Oran now than
Yes.
where he was before.
Exactly. This is, in other words, it's what is normal or normalcy that's so negotiable. We may not want to believe that, but I think one of the characters, I forget, says, given time, one gets used to anything. That's that's the point of that's kind of the underlying kind of universal condition of humanity. Okay, so are we good? Shall we then now open up and we'll discuss together? Thank you very much. Okay, so. So with Grand, when he died, when he doesn't die, you remember with Panelu, the final kind of verdict on his case was what? We had this discussion last time. What was the final description of his case? Panelu, the priest.
Like uncertain case or improbable?
Yeah, yes, uncertain, doubtful case.
Doubtful.
And then we went some distance with the word doubt there, how it has more than one meaning. It's a doubtful in the sense that we don't know what the actual cause of his death was, we do not know. But at another level, it is important because he's a religious man and he died struggling with his doubts. His faith was challenged, and that's in that state he died. And then I made this kind of scandalous argument that in a way, the moment he starts to struggle with faith or doubts, is precisely when he becomes a man of faith. Because a human being is not fit to have complete faith. So when you are actually struggling with doubts, you are being faithful. So in a way, he died of a doubtful case, and as such, he becomes for the first time actually engaged with faith. Until then, he was not a man of faith. He was a man of doctrine. He was a doctrinal man. He just knew what to say to the congregation. But that had nothing to do with, as far as we can tell, it had nothing to do with his personal relationship with God. Faith was kind of missing there, and then it set in after the little boy's death. Now, then with Grand, we see that there's a particular word that the text chooses to describe what happens to him when he doesn't die. He is resurrected. That's another Christian concept. So it's really funny that the man of God died from the struggle of doubts, just to read it metaphorically. But here's this man who has little to do with God or church or anything else, not that he rejects anything, right? Just like any good existentialist thinker would not reject God. He would simply say, it just doesn't concern me. Okay, God is not going to come down and help me today, so I just need to still struggle every day with my existence. Whether God exists or not, it doesn't really concern me. He's kind of like that. He's not one to reject anything, but he just does what he has to do. And yet, the most Christian, kind of holiest term is given to him. He was resurrected. So it's almost like he's the most Christian figure, although he's not a believer. I mean, this is just an argument. I'm not saying that this is the truth. The whole point here is to create an argument and see if you can, you see, you have to argue because there's no absolute truth here. But you see, because the juxtaposition is very interesting, a man of God dying, of a doubtful case, and then there's this guy who is resurrected. I think it's very tempting to read them together as a kind of a meaning that the text wants to, present. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So there's that, and what Kant wants to do is really it's with language. I'm just going down the list of things that I felt I didn't have time to talk about last time. So his original relationship with language, because we just made that argument earlier, how his relationship with language changed through the plague, right? So before the plague, his relationship with language was that he was struggling because he was looking for this particular effect. He wanted to achieve this particular effect of language, and what is it? On page 104, if you have it, otherwise I'll read it. So it says, this is when he actually shows his manuscript to Ryu, and then he says, oh, that's only a rough draft. Once I've succeeded in rendering perfectly the picture in my mind's eye, once my words have the exact tempo of this ride, the horse is trotting, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, see what I mean? The rest will come more easily. So in other words, he wants language to be able to capture exactly the sensation that he has. When he's picturing this woman on horseback, he has the sound, he has the visual image, and he has his body reacting to it. He wants his language to capture all that sensory experience. And you see why this is an absurd project, because no language can do that. So he wants his language to be kind of like a photograph of his mind, what his mind, but it's not really the mind, it's really what his senses are experiencing. So you can tell that he's an absurd hero because he has an absurd wish, not a practical wish. It's an absurd wish. Why is it an absurd wish? Because he's going straight to the most absurd element of our existence, which is language. I mean, of course, there's the fact that our bodies are here, we were born, there's that basic absurdity, of course, but in relation to that fact of the matter, we create language in order to live in that absurd situation. And in using language, we create more and more absurdity. This was, we talked about this. So, but he wants to somehow correct language which does what? It actually abstracts. You know, that's why we said language, the original form of language is 0 and 1, plus minus. It has no, after that it's all just secondary, just adding on to the basic differentiation that starts with, in our computer language, it would be 0 and 1. So he's actually tackling with the essence of language. It's incapacity to actually capture our experience. That's what language is. It cannot do it. But he thought this is something that he can correct. You see how absurd it is, right? So there are many more. I mean, not many, but two more places where we see him describe what he wants to do with this manuscript. So, yeah, another place he says, on page 135, he says, next, he showed some anxiety about the adjective handsome. In his opinion, it didn't convey enough, and he set to looking for an epithet that would promptly, clearly photograph the superb animal he saw with his mind's eye. So he's looking at the horse in his mind, and the word handsome just doesn't capture it. So this is the kind of struggle that he has, and then he comes to just like that, no ceremony. He just says, "Oh, I've decided to cut out all the adjectives." So that was 306, I think. Yeah, he says, "I've cut out." It's not even deciding. He says, "I've cut out all the adjectives." So, with a twinkle in his eye, he took off his hat. Took his hat off, bringing it low in a purpose. So, in other words, he's just, yeah. So that's calm. And then to talk about Tapu, I asked you to think about what being a saint means, because it actually appears in many places, even from a very early stage of the narrative, like on page 118, there's already something about saint. And then there's that, of course, very important conversation between Tapu and Huyu, where Tapu says he wants to be a saint or something of that sort, and then Huyu says he's not that ambitious. He says he's just it's the opposite. He says he wants to be a man, and then it's actually it's more ambitious. Maybe I should. So the point of that passage is that. Okay, so yeah, right. So it's 2:55. I'm sorry. When I turn it off, I get hot. When I turn it on, I get cold. This is I'm talking about the AC. Sorry. I just can't get it right. So here. The top of the page, Tapu says, "What interests me is learning how to become a saint." That's what it says. Then Liu says, towards the bottom, "But I feel more fellowship with the defeated than with saints. With the defeated than with saints." what interests me is being a man. Okay, so Tahu, he's interested in how to become a saint, and the doctor wants to know more about how to be a man. And then Tahu answers what? Yes, we are both after the same thing, but I am less ambitious. This is does that make sense? So he's saying you and I have different words, but actually we are going for the same thing. Except that I am less ambitious than you, which means to be interested in being a saint is less ambitious than to be interested in being a man. Which means that to be a man is more challenging. It's harder. Right? And in thinking about the saint, Tahu actually thinks about a couple of other characters. Do you remember who he calls up in his mind when he reflects on the saint? Someone? Yeah.
The old man.
The old man.
Spanish guy who picks up the beans.
Yes, yeah. The asthma patient. And also the guy who spits on cats. Why? How could they be saints? I mean, he's not saying that they are saints, but he's thinking, are they saints? So there you have a clue what a saint means to him. What does it mean? What do they have in common?
And both old.
Okay, yeah. What else?
They have habits.
Good. And what's the function of the habits for them?
Doing every day what they have in front of them.
Yeah, so what? So what kind of people do they become thanks to these habits?
Predictable,
Uh-huh.
regular.
Yeah,
Ordinary.
yeah, all that.
Visualized and grounded.
Yes. They live in peace. This is related to how Tahu he wanted to find peace. This is related to one of the questions that the presenter gave us. He wanted to find peace, which means he wanted to become a saint. For him means to live in peace. To be a man means what? You know that to live in peace is, in a way, it's a bit of renunciation of your humanity.
To say things?
Yeah.
Is renunciation human?
Why? Because you're no longer struggling. You live in peace means what? Everything is now, nothing is surprising, everything is... But then think about these two people with these strange habits. These habits do, I don't know if I can say nothing, but very little to do anything for humanity, not just humanity out there at large, but their own humanity. These habits are there almost kind of to deaden their humanity. They become less sensitive, which means they can be more in peace. They're no longer striving, struggling. As opposed to, if you remember, Ryu, who's always a little bit melancholy. He's never a happy man. Even when there's no problem, he is, in a way, struggling with just the fact of living. Fact of living is enough to make him struggle. So in that sense, to be a man is more ambitious. It takes more work. But to be a saint is to kind of like to check out from existence that is defined by existential struggle, which these two old men exemplify. But I don't think it really is a question of how old the person is, because in a way, especially the mother figures, they're much older. But they're kind of shining examples of how to live without becoming saints, if that makes sense. They're saintly precisely because they're not trying to become saints or try to just live in peace. So in a way, you're saintly precisely when you're not trying to become a saint, just like it's when you're not a self-declared believer like monk, you can actually become resurrected as if you are a kind of a figure closest to Christ, at least in this narrative world. Okay, I think that's it for today.
Right? It's only 1 hour. Yeah, I got 90. What did you think it was? No, you got 98. You got 98. I told you that. Really?
So I was
Okay, thank you, bro. Thanks for being so person. Yeah, I'm also happy to be honest, like, because my biggest problem was like my handwriting was so shit, so I couldn't